and welcome to my channel on finding the art in life. I'm Laura Gibson-Cuddy, artist and writer. Last week, I dived into the complex character of Mr. Darcy from Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. You can find the link to this video in the description below. Subscribe and hit the notification so you don't miss a single video every single Thursday. Today, I'm exploring the character of Elizabeth Bennet. Is she someone to model after, or just as rude and prideful as her love interest? I asked my friends on Twitter and Instagram what they thought of the infamous Elizabeth Bennet. Some of the most popular descriptions were sassy, independent, obnoxious, and emotionally distant. Over 50% on my poll on Twitter think of her as fiery, rude, but honest. But Elizabeth Bennet is an icon. Isn't she someone to be modeled after? When people talk about great romances, they'll list Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet right next to Romeo and Juliet. But therein lies the answer to this puzzling question. Maybe Elizabeth Bennet isn't quite the model woman to model after. I'm going to start by saying one paragraph from Elizabeth's younger sister, Mary. The passage goes, "Pride, observed Mary, who picked herself upon the solidity of her reflections, is a very common failing, I believe. By all that I have ever read, I am convinced that it is very common indeed that human nature is particularly prone to it, that there are very few of us who do not cherish a feeling of self-compliancy on the score of some quality or other, real or imaginary. Vanity and pride are different things, though the words are often used synonymously. A person may be proud without being vain. Pride relates more to our opinion of ourselves. Vanity is what we would have others think of us." So pride relates more to our opinion of ourselves. Elizabeth is ashamed of her family. She says on multiple occasions how ashamed she is of her mother, how silly her sisters are, and even her father on occasion for speaking out of place. As Elizabeth is ashamed of how poor they are, their standing in life, she actually desires a rich life. She doesn't even say it until almost the end of the book when she's talking to her sister Jane. And I mentioned this in the other video where she tells Jane, "I do believe I first started to fall in love with Mr. Darcy when I saw his vast grounds at Pemberley." And Darcy has a fantastic estate. The cover on this version of Pride and Prejudice, it likens to one of the ballrooms that might have possibly been in his home. There are multiple pictures of this vast estate and what it might have looked like. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. And the opposite is also true, I believe. A woman desiring a good fortune may also be in want of a man. Now, I'm not saying that Elizabeth was totally loveless. I'm not saying this at all. I believe she does love Mr. Darcy. But how much does she truly love him? Or is she maybe tolerating the things that vexed her in the beginning with him? I want to go to a passage where it talks about in the last chapters of how each character is feeling about the engagement and the wedding of Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet. Georgiana is Mr. Darcy's younger sister. Pemberley was now Georgiana's home, and the attachment of the sisters, Elizabeth and Georgiana, was exactly what Darcy had hoped to see. They were able to love each other even as well as they intended. Georgiana had the highest opinion in the world of Elizabeth, though at first she often listened with an astonishment bordering on alarm at her lively, sportive manner of talking to her brother. He, who had always inspired in herself a respect which almost overcame her affection, she now saw the object of open pleasantry. Her mind received knowledge which had never before fallen in her way. By Elizabeth's instructions, she began to comprehend that a woman may take liberties with her husband, which a brother will not always allow in a sister more than 10 years younger than himself. So Elizabeth took liberties with her husband. Now, you can be innocent and say, oh, she was just speaking her mind. She was being an independent woman. And I do believe that is true. But you can also dive in between the lines in this. Perhaps there was a lot of arguments in the home. Maybe Elizabeth spoke her mind above Darcy's several times. And Georgiana, of course, as a younger sister, is not used to talking back to her brother, whereas Elizabeth holds her ground because maybe she's not as content as she thought she would be. She needs an opinion versus Darcy is used to being stubborn and voicing his opinion when necessary, because his good opinion when lost is lost forever. Elizabeth Bennet might not be the woman to achieve after, but we can definitely look to her as a role model in how she presents herself. She presents herself in not worrying about what other people think, although she really does worry what other people think. But she presents herself in a way where she's opinionated, she's independent, she's sassy, and still a little bit obnoxious. I would desire for us women and men to not care about what the other thinks, to not strive after an image. We don't need a high standing to be of high standing character. We do not need to be prideful and prejudiced to be outstanding citizens. Both of these characters, Elizabeth and Darcy, have vibrant red personalities. They have a stubbornness, a pridefulness, and yes, a prejudice, as the title predicts. Their personalities aren't necessarily those to achieve after. Even their romance is not someone to aspire to. They're opinionated, they're strong-willed, they butt heads constantly. But it turns out that it is a fantastic story to be read because of it. Red can be violent, bold, and unpredictable. Thus we have the romance between Darcy and Elizabeth. Let's strive to be a little less red and maybe a little bit more blue. Next week, I'm going to dive into something Doctor Who. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification so you don't miss a single video every Thursday where I find the art in life.